Good morning, everyone, and we welcome you to our Bible study class from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent. This morning is Saturday, May 20th, 2017, and our moderator is Amanda from Missouri. Go ahead, Amanda.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'll start by reading our quote for the morning, and it's from Science and Health by Mrs. Eddy, but it's actually from the third edition in 1881. The only correct rendering of the scripture is its spiritual sense. Before knowledge increased, spiritual sense, more than what is termed material sense, governed man. The soul-inspired patriarchs heard the voice of truth and talked with God consciously, even as others, through a supposed material sense, hear what is not truth, and talk with error. When Jacob wrestled with a man, it was not a personality, but a sensual belief, and he wrestled until daybreak, until the light of divine science revealed the great fact of being, that there are no material senses, and man is spiritual and pure as his Maker, that a material conception of life is an error, and is not the truth of being. When this divine science dawned upon him, he saw that man was the image and likeness of God, of purity and perfection, and he also saw that as such, he could not be maimed or lose one jot of his completeness. Then Jacob rose in the majesty of his Maker, the one mind, to destroy the error of material belief, that there are minds many, and thus to reflect his spiritual origin.
Thank you.
It was a wonderful find.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I thought it was interesting because the 1910, our current version, is in our lesson, so I thought it was interesting to read that third edition.
Very interesting, yes. Very helpful. Thank you.
If we're ready to go on, our topic for today is restoring spiritual identity, and our readings were from Genesis 32 and 33 and Hosea. So our first question is, how did Jacob react when his messengers told him Esau and his men were coming to meet him? Did he act as one who had just recently declared, "This is the camp of God"?
It does say that he reacted very fearfully, and no, it didn't. He didn't act as one who just recently declared this is the camp of God. It would appear he went right into the human mind at first.
He reacted like I used to do, talking all the talk and not feeling it.
Yeah, he was still scared for his life, wasn't he?
Now, we do need to apply this to ourselves. I always liked what Tom from New York would say, which always I could relate to as well, was that he would study the lesson in the morning and then he would go out and begin to worry and get concerned about things. So this is why we have to, as Florence said, make sure that we are really feeling it. We're not just reading about it and then the first thing that comes up at all fearful and nervous and everything else. It's sometimes a challenge, but it needs to be done.
Yeah, because, the question, did he act as one who had recently declared this is the camp of God? I thought that was a very telling question. Because maybe he did act as though he just recently declared this is the camp of God. If his concept of God was limited, I mean, what is your concept of God? Is it the infinite, omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient God, or is it limited? Times when I when I act as though God is not omnipresent.
Now, thank you. That was an interesting point, and I hadn't thought of it the way that you just mentioned, Gary, because you're right. That's a very valid question, and it's one that I know I certainly need to consider because I found how I understood his reaction very applicable to what we just talked about, of how we might start our day, we think the right way, and then we go out into the world, so to speak, with whatever it is we have to do, and suddenly it's as though we're not feeling the calmness and the peacefulness that we had. And part of that is our true understanding of God, of understanding his omniscience, that he's always with us, and not using our understanding as a human sense of God. Certainly.
Yeah,
difference.
I was talking about a healing I had recently. It's just fascinating because I had strained my foot from exercising, and sometimes my walk would be painful, and then the pain would go away, and then maybe later it'd come back. I was kind of not really sure whether it hurt or not. But I felt like there was a tendency to pray for the healing, And then one day I was walking along, and I was thinking, oh, no, you don't want to do that. Frankly, there's always problems. So just be grateful for things as they are, And then it was a couple of days later I was noticing, and I didn't have the pain in my foot. And it was fascinating. So it's been a few weeks. I haven't had any pain in my foot since then.
After you stopped praying for the healing and you were grateful for God's omnipotence.
Yes.
Instead.
Yeah. And I didn't even think about it that way. I just thought, be grateful as you are.
Yeah, and dear Jacob had this vision, this epiphany, this, meeting with one of God's angels. And he was exalted for a moment. But did it stick?
I think this is why it's important to not lock yourself away. You got to get out there and make sure that you can still practice science in the world. I know there's been times where I've been doing really well here, but then I have encountered somebody that I had a material history with, and it sort of all went out the window. And then later on, talking to my practitioner, she's like, well, you went into that situation and you weren't handling everything. So quite a wake-up call.
But that's not such a bad thing. It's just one of the experiences.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Because I know from my experience, especially after coming here to the church, quite frankly, I would have a wonderful healing. And then I think I may have told this before, on Wednesday I would stand up and give a testimony of this healing that did indeed happen. And for a while there, inevitably, on Thursday, the very day after, I had some experience, as if it were to say, oh yeah, and then I would have to fight my way through a tough experience. It was as if error was going to say, oh yeah, to this healing that I had. Well, then on the next day I had to do more work and to prove that it really was such. So error does oppose, but the fight is a good one, and it can only do us good. It strengthens us.
Well, I find that a little bit discouraging when I encounter that. What you said, yes, you're wonderful. You feel so grateful for the healing, and then, like you said, the next day, error comes back and says, "No, you're not. This is still here," and it's such a I don't know. To me, I guess I'm weaker in that respect that I don't find that I can. I find it discouraging. It's like, oh, but I thought I was done with this, and you still have to keep on practicing. It's a battle.
But even the discouragement is just a trick of the devil. And fight your way through, like Jacob's done in this story, is strengthening and good.
One thing that used to happen to me as well, and I would find that when it happened the next day, I would say, "Oh, you again? You don't scare me." and then I would handle it from a position of dominion, and it stopped happening.
And that happens to me too. And I find that's the best way to prove that you're over it, because it's, to me, when it happens now, it's so clear what's happening. It's just something trying to tell me, no, you're not over something. And it almost makes me laugh sometimes, but it is the best opportunity to prove that you're over it.
I think
It's
when
why
you
we
see
had
that, we had a watching point a few weeks ago that says we need to know the nothingness and also the powerlessness of error. And if you think that you ever had something in the first place, you are not knowing its utter nothingness. There's another watching point that says this as well, that after you've had a so-called experience, you need to know it never happened in divine mind, because in truth, it didn't, no more than a bad dream. But this is the thoroughness of the work, and this is digging deep and getting the weeds, stupid gardener, as Mrs. Eddy says, getting the weeds out and totally burned and destroyed. But also, she also says that things diminish until they finally disappear. So what if you have to keep working on it? That's all right. You just keep working and knowing its utter nothingness and powerlessness. Who was speaking?
I was going to say essentially the same thing, that no matter how often it comes or how grave or whatever it appears, we still have to continue to know its nothingness, because that is its chief blow. That is what will make it eventually get out of your thinking.
Really, are we ever done having
No.
to deal with the lie? No. So that's why Bruce said that, when the discouragement comes, that's just the devil's way of getting you to give up or believe that the lie is the truth.
I think you can see that if it comes, you're not afraid anymore, like Carol said. It's like, you're so what? I know what you are. You don't frighten me. You don't change who I am. That kind of, it's really then proving that you know God is all.
Yeah, and that's what it means, where Mrs. Eddy wrote, hold thought steadfastly to the enduring, the good, and the true. That's what that means. I mean, when the lie comes up and tries to discourage you, you tell it where to go.
The other thing that's helped me is where Mrs. Eddy says that the judgment day comes hourly and continually. Well, this is a grand journey. This is not to be taken in any negative sense. So it's a process, and it's a good one.
Yeah, that's great.
I've been fighting with this cold, and before I always used to go and get antibiotics, that took care of it. And my daughter now, she supports Christian Science. She says antibiotics don't help colds. Anyway, so I called off the doctor, and I'm still fighting it, but it's I feel like Jacob so much. I can identify with him. What a battle it is. And until you say, I will not let thee go until thou bless me, you haven't got there.
Well, that's right. And the battle is the Lord's. It's not yours. And when these things cease to bless, it will cease to exist. The blessing is that it forces you closer to God. It tests your faith. There's nothing better than a good test of faith, because when you pass the test, you pass it. We
And
all
as
get
the
tried.
as the hymn says, treading each temptation down, reaching for a higher crown. And every experience blesses us. And we might think the same thing is coming up again over and over, but it isn't. There's always, it's coming up. It means there's more lessons to be learned. and the deeper you get into your science until it does diminish, until it finally disappears.
Well, I guess it's coming to to a point that, you know, when you've done all you could do, and then just turn your, you know, just be like a child and said, okay, God, you know, it is what it is, and thy will be done. And just continue affirming his love and trying to see through whatever it is that's afflicting at the time.
I think Tom had the right answer when he said, stop fighting it and be grateful for the good that you have. Look for the goodness of God all around you and be grateful for that and dwell on that. And pretty soon, when you discipline yourself to see God's presence all around you, the lie will disappear because there won't be any room for it.
Yeah,
I guess it's helpful what he said about that gratefulness. As I was walking yesterday in the lower Manhattan, was so hot and so unbearable, and I've been struggling, you know, with my knees, and I just kept walking, and at one time, I guess I thought, well, I'm grateful that at least I'm doing this much. So I was able to make it home, but I guess this is something that I could apply. Thank you.
And one other point is, and we've certainly learned it here, is the purpose of any attack, as you are now working for God, and is to get you to stop that work. And if you see it as that, and impersonalize it, and just see it's trying to get you to stop your work for God, whatever that is, just radiating life, truth, and love, and you say you're not going to do this, you've overcome that, and it will go. It will go. Mrs. Eddy, of course, knew this in her household, and anytime anyone had a problem, she knew it wasn't some physical problem. She knew it was trying to stop the work and the cause of science going forward. And this is a basic premise of our church in moving forward. And as you see that and impersonalize any error that's trying to get you to stop what God is requiring of you, of course, he will give you everything you need to overcome it and to rise higher on the scale of being. No doubt about it, and it's been proven over and over and over again here in this church.
And if you've had a problem and you've healed it, and it seems to come back, I think we've been taught that it's not the same problem. It's another one, and it's another opportunity to work for God. It's not the same one.
Thank you.
Well, I love this lesson because that part of Jacob wrestling with that unknown, and finally, he's overcome it. I just love it. It just speaks to me. Thank you for it. Thank you. It's great.
I guess we're ready to go on.
Yes, up to number 2, and it's actually somewhat similar to what we've already spoken about, but I'll read it in case anyone has some additional comments. After his prayer, which is in Genesis 32, 9 through 12, what does Jacob do? And then the follow-up was, does that show trust in God after he had just set forth his prayer?
I think he also took some practical steps of spreading his family out in this highest sense of what he thought was best to do as he moved forward. And then after that, he had some alone time with the struggle. I do think he took some practical steps that he saw his highest sense of right at the time.
Well, he sent his servants ahead with gifts.
appease. He speaks of appeasing Esau.
He sent 3 groups of servants ahead of him with gifts.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting, these two things. And I'm sure if you think about your own life, you can relate to it as well. He did everything he could, yes, appease. He tried to make it right. And in a way, in a human way, he did. But still, that's not bad or wrong. But if that's only as far as he went, it wouldn't have been enough, would it? No. He had to take the next step, and so must we all, and that is to wrestle with whatever error is trying to hold us down. We've got to do that. You can't just appease or do the human thing, although that's certainly good, and I would say commendable. You try to right any wrong you've done, but that is not enough. I've tried. I mean, you probably have too, where you've done some human thing to make up for some fault you've made. But unless you've really wrestled with the devil, the error still is there, isn't it?
It sure is. I think if you're doing the human things out of fear also, then it's certainly, I don't know that that's, of course, it's not right. It doesn't bring the right outcome, I should say.
Oh, that's right, because the motive is ultimately wrong. But it's a step. It is a step forward, but again, it is a human step. And it isn't fully trusting the Father, but it is a step.
I think he was still fearful of what his brother's reaction was going to be.
Most definitely he was.
If he didn't listen to his mother and he had done the right thing in the first place, none of this fear would have come upon him. But he may never have learned the lesson that he ultimately did learn.
Very true.
In looking at the questions, I kept going backwards in the story, and I came up with some points. Would it be okay if I give those? Jacob sought things of spirit, God, and Esau sought and lived in the material. Some of Jacob's dealings originally could have been viewed as a bit questionable on a material basis, but his motive was always in an attempt to improve his spiritual understanding. And it was not all of his own doing. The parents came in on it too, and also tradition rather than the merit of people being equal. This whole thing about birthright, like we discussed a couple of weeks ago, male, female, etc. It's always the spiritual that should be the higher. So the differing and clashing of opinions of his parents also influenced his actions in the beginning before he had a higher spiritual understanding. So in a sense, he paid for this with his servitude to Laban, however that's pronounced. But in his servitude, he continued to learn and grow from the experience by creating a sustenance for himself and his family out of what Laban rejected. This experience gave him the understanding and means to deal with and overcome the whole situation with the original strife with Esau, with again using what he had earned from Laban to appease, or however you want to call it, with Esau. Well, one has to remember that Esau did give up his blessing to Jacob in a trade for his life when he was in difficulty at one time. And then the greatest difficulty to bring forth the biggest wrestling in our consciousness, which delivers the most meaningful changes in fruition, demonstration. So when he
did experience this great fear, like I know for myself, when things are quote unquote going good, I forget about God, and next thing I know, I've got a big problem. Then I turn to God, do the wrestling, and then things work out when I do turn to God. But if I turn to God right away, I wouldn't have had to have that big wrestling.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Those are really good points. Yeah, I think it's very helpful to see that, Jacob was destined to, to carry the Christ spirit and start the nation that was the highest concept of God at the time. But he had to go through some footsteps to learn the lessons that he needed to learn. And he certainly shouldn't be, we can judge all we want, the footsteps that he had to take. These are all footsteps in his growth. And it culminated with the wrestling with the angel, where he grew out of this whole experience to a point where he was worthy of carrying on and building a great nation. Who's to say if he hadn't gone through all of these steps, would he have come out worthy to be able to do what he ended up having, what he ended up doing?
No, he was being prepared, as we all must be prepared. And that's why whatever difficult situations we might go through, all things work together for good to them that trust God, to them that are called according to his purpose. So whatever you are going through, God will turn it to gold if you turn to him and realize that you are being shaped and molded into his image and likeness. That's all that's going on. If you see that, you can take heart, no matter how hard or difficult the journey may seem to get at times, to know that there's something greater God's preparing you for. Maybe at the time there's no sign of it, but it will come. It will come. And of course, Jacob's mother saw the spirituality in him. She knew, which is why I know at one point that you just would think would just be terrible what she did, but she intervened because she knew for the blessing to go to Esau would not be God's plan ultimately. They were all being led by their highest sense of right.
Did Jacob's action here show trust in God? Well, in a way, yes, it did. I mean, he was told by God to go back to his country. And in order to do that, he had to face Esau. If he didn't trust God, he would have turned right around and gone in the other direction. But he obeyed God. And he took whatever steps came to him as being the highest right at the time to fulfill what God had him to do. I think it shows great trust in God and wisdom in the way he did it.
In our watch this week, it says, trusting God gives you the ability to demonstrate God's presence and power. I just say this prayer over and over.
Yes, I think the key is that trust, because in another sense, I feel that For example, when I have declared that there is no loss in the divine mind, and don't rest there and go looking and doing all the other things that I think should be done, especially if I've lost something. I look here, and all that. I don't find it until I get back and be quiet with what I have declared. There is no loss in divine mind, and trust and wait, and pretty soon I'm led to it so easily. So this is another way I'm looking at this.
Thank you. And, I see it too. You must, all of us must, I must, face your demons. What happens if you don't?
You go through it over and over again.
Yes, you will. And they will pursue you. You've got
Usually seem to get bigger.
They will. They'll get bigger. They'll haunt you. You'll see it everywhere you go. They'll keep having same experiences over and over again. You have to face the demons, and the demons are the things that you fear. The demons are everything that you think is a power apart from God. Mrs. Eddy says this is science and health. Everyone has to come to the point where they know that there is no power apart from God. And you will keep facing those or being pursued by the demons until you turn around and confront them and wrestle, as Jacob did, because it doesn't come easy. It's not just a matter of skipping around and turning around and everything's great, which is what so many scientists want. As this lesson says over and over, it was the striving that brought it out, the wrestling and striving. But our demons must be faced. So what are you afraid of? And then turn around and confront it. Don't run from it, because it will chase you until you do face it and destroy it, because error is a coward before the truth.
Shall we move on?
Yes, thank you. Question 3 is it relevant that Jacob was alone when the angel appeared?
Yes, I think so. I think each of us have to be alone, like Mary just said before. We have to face our own demons, and the only way to do it is doing it along with God, I think.
Very good.
There is no other way.
Is it possible to have your wrestling and face your demons when you're surrounded by other people?
No, very distracting.
That's why I say shut out the material senses. I mean, so you and God in your thinking.
That's why when Jesus was, I don't remember which it was, but when he was in someone's house and there was a dying child or a dead child, he had to put everybody out of the room before he could bring her back.
And he would also have times when he would go up to the mountain alone.
Many times. And when he put those people out, that was because of their fearful thought. He needed to be alone, yes, to address the error and bring her back. But in facing our own demons, yes, they must be faced alone. Have you ever tried to get someone else to help you do that? I have. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It only confuses the issue, or it makes it worse. You mean you start telling somebody all your problems and somehow wanting them to help you or to do it for you? It doesn't work.
More to worry about.
More to worry about. More human opinion. More everything. more distraction, confusion. It does not work. There's no other way to do it. What did Mrs.
Try to
Eddy
give
say?
you answers, and the answers are just hopeless. No, so you say, no, that's no good. That won't help. That won't do it.
It won't. You've got to do this by yourself. Mrs. Eddy says, the Christian scientist is alone with his own being and with the reality of things. I often think of that. So, and that includes everything, companionship, having a husband or wife, all of that. If God is in the middle of it, it's fine. But ultimately, we are all alone. We are alone with our own being and with the reality of things, alone with God. We've got to face it. Mrs. Evans used to say, you don't go into the kingdom of God in pairs.
And there's also something about having a fear of not having friends. And if you do have that fear, at some time you will find you have none. You'll be left by yourself.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Mrs. Eddy says already that seeming void is filled with love. And all of the things she says, she has experienced. And that's why they have the clout behind it. And she would say, alone, yes, but never lonely. Because she knew God was with her all the time. And we all have to come to that. You can't have any peace in your heart until you come to that. And then you have right relationships because you are complete within yourself. You're not needy, looking to someone else for your joy or your answers or your whatever. God.
People will be attracted to you in the right way and for the right reason. And your relationships will be harmonious with those people. You'll never be without something good or useful to do and people to do it for, to do it with. Our church is a perfect example of that. What did Jesus say? If I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me. He was never alone. He had disciples. He had work to do, people to heal. And yet, he had his alone time with God to prepare himself for it.
And I think it's how you would define alone also, because both Christ Jesus and Mrs. Eddy both would turn away even when they were in a crowd. So they would turn alone to God to handle the situation, but from a human standpoint, they were very much in the midst of people.
Right. It means
even the spiritual idea of alone means all one, which is all one with God, who is the source and center of everything that's going on anyway. So,
thank you. All one. That's good.
Very good. Yeah, it means to eliminate the distractions, doesn't it?
Yes.
I know the loneliest I've ever been is in a room with other people. So.
and that how true that is.
Well, and
That's
if you're in a room with a lot of people who are contrary to what you know to be true, horribly uncomfortable, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Also, this idea of needing to be alone to work out your own salvation with God applies to our children as well. And this is an important point for those of us who have ever been parents. We can't do this for our children. We have to allow them to be alone with God themselves, have their own experiences, go through their own tests, find their own way with God.
A helpful thought that I've had come at times where I felt isolated or alone is that despite that, there's an army of angels at your back. And I guess they're at your front and side too. And sometimes you need to go into that sense of quietness or silence in order to be able to hear them.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Good.
So true.
Very good.
Surrounded with a legion of angels, you are never alone. I think of that as well, very often. You know that Mrs. Eddy quotes Shakespeare in the beginning of Science and Health. Nothing is neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. So if you're in your room feeling miserable because you're all alone and everyone else has friends and whatever, well, you will be miserable. If you are alone in your room, knowing you're surrounded with legions of angels and God is your mind and He's right there, then you will be joyful. And that's the correct picture. The other is what the so-called human mind or devil or whatever you want to call it wants you to believe. So, 2, argue on the right side. Argue on the right side. Argue what is the truth. You will find yourself very happy, joyful in the Lord.
I'm finding, I guess, having been a lone farmer for many years, in many senses, that it's in that room full of people that I forget that God is there and the angels are around me, which is what I'm trying to now nurture and develop.
Good. Yes. Yeah, it works the other way. Some people love to be all by themselves. They feel much better when they're not with people. So, whatever,
so
wherever
true.
you are. Yeah, they want to be by themselves. They don't want to be with anybody. But that's not good either. Did Jesus? Jesus did go to the mountaintop. It's a combination. But He did come down from that mountaintop and was with people. He didn't hide out, in other words. You don't hide in your room because you don't like people. That's not healthy. How can you love God if you don't love your brother? The combination.
I guess the difference may be that it's that drive that some people have of always be surrounded by friends and people and not wanting to be alone is their main drive. Whether, you have to be comfortable being alone sometimes. There's nothing wrong with it. And it could be actually very refreshing and uplifting, but just being so driven to have friends, like I see some young people going to the bars every Friday night because that's the thing to do with friends and so forth. That I think is what is wrong. What is, I don't want to say wrong, it's not right. It could lead you to have a life very empty at times.
Yes. Yes. You have to be at peace with yourself, wherever you are, with people or by yourself. It's being centered and at peace with yourself, with God, and with your fellow man.
Part of the thing about facing your fears, wasn't there a story about some guy who, I think he was dreaming that he was being chased by this guy, and finally he gets him backed up against the wall and he says, "Why are you chasing me?" And the guy goes, "I don't know, it's your dream."
Right, that's the devil. The devil is chasing this guy, and he's running and running and running from the devil, and the devil, when he finally catches him, he says, "Well, what are you going to do with me? I'm so afraid of you." And the devil says, "I don't know. This is your dream." So this, again, is confronting your demons, because it is your dream. And if you don't confront it, they will continue to chase after you. And you'll just dream that Adam dream till you turn around, face it, and wake up. Realize it was never the truth. God's always been with you.
So we've got a couple more questions that are kind of interesting. Shall we move on? Or?
Yes. Oh, I'm ready if you all are. With number 4, why did Jacob cling to the angel, and how did he ask for a blessing?
Didn't the angel say, "Let me go, for the day breaketh," or the truth dawns on you? And he said, "No, I don't want to let you go until thou bless me." He didn't. He wanted to make sure it was complete and full, and he got the blessing out of this whole situation.
So what does that mean for us?
I think that when we face a problem, you need to completely see its unreality and understand what happened completely. And realize that it was never true in the first place.
He was like, I fought the good fight. I won my prize now. And I guess just asserting his right as the child of God, I want my blessing now. I fought with error, and now I need, I guess, I don't know, I'm not putting it in the right words, but...
Well, we're taught here that sometimes you need to demand the blessing, and as I think Jeremy wrote on the forum, that might seem kind of abrasive or arrogant or something, and I always thought that too. But you think of how the children of Israel wandered around for 40 years. How close were they to the promised land? My understanding is they were pretty close. But they just wandered around. They never got there. So don't be one of these people that you never get there, because that can be an erroneous state of thought too, where you just think, oh, I don't deserve the blessing, or I don't whatever, and so you just wander around with it when it could be over. So get it over. I know Mrs. Evans told me that once. Why are you still wandering around with this problem? Demand the blessing. Get it over. And I did, and the blessing came. So there's a good point here to be made, and it's not being arrogant or anything. Not when you've really worked something through and done your wrestling. Don't just keep it hanging out there. Say, okay, God has healed me. Confirm the truth. Know that you are well, or whatever. That you have your finances, whatever problem you're having. Declare the truth about it and know it's here. Because in truth, it always is here. It's just you haven't had the eyes to see that it's here. So, an important point. And he wrestled. Yes, he brought it through all the way, because the other point is I just want my healing. I don't care if I know anything more about God. Just heal me now. Fill up my purse or make me feel better or whatever else the demand is. With no wrestling, no learning more about God, just wanting the healing. That's not a real science healing. That is
okay.
So
it could be. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, it could be that you are wanting the healing, but what you need to stick to or cling to, as Mrs. Eddy said, we're not doing. I just want the healing, but are you clinging to the truth of being, like she said, steadfastly? Yes. Stick to the truth of being. Cling. These are strong words that she uses as what we should be doing. Sometimes I know that I wasn't doing it. I was all fearful. All I cared about was being fearful. Instead of just say, I'm not going to be fearful anymore, and stop the agonizing.
Jacob felt strongly. Jacob had a purpose to his life, and he felt that purpose. He felt it very strongly. And he demanded that he get as much out of this experience as is possible so that he could carry on his purpose for his life, whatever that purpose was. we should each feel that we have a purpose to our life, a divine purpose. We're all put here for some reason. We should feel that reason. We should feel a need to do something for God and for mankind. And when a problem comes to us that tries to distract us from doing what God wants for us to do, we should demand the blessing. We should demand to get everything we can out of every experience so that we can fulfill our divine purpose. That's what I got out of this.
And, again, Carpenter talks about that, too. He says you shouldn't want to be healed until you have squeezed every ounce of good out of the experience. Let it take you a scale higher in being, in your spiritual discernment of all things good. Let it bring you higher. Don't even want the healing until you get that. Those are things to consider because most people just want the healing. And then they go back, as the Bible says, they go back to their vomit. You haven't learned anything. You haven't grown, nor have you helped the cause of science. And the spiritualization of mankind and the destruction of sin is what we are about. And it's hard to bring it about when we are just dwelling in the human sense of things. That's by what that first quote that Amanda found from the third edition is so wonderful. Because certainly it's excellent. He wrestled until daybreak, until the light of divine science revealed the great fact of being, that there are no material senses, and man is spiritual and pure as his maker, that a material conception of life is an error and is not the truth of being. When this divine science dawned upon him, he saw that man was the image and likeness of God, of purity and perfection. And he saw also that as such he could not be maimed or lose one jot of his completeness. And then, because he wrestled and saw that, then he was fit to do what? Which is the next question.
See God's face in his brothers.
Yes, thank you, Linda. He was fit to see that. And in seeing that, all the error of it seemed so real, so terrible, gone on for so long. What happened to it?
And it dissipated.
It did.
It was eliminated by the truth. There was a total change in Esau's attitude. Once Jacob found and clung to the truth.
They were both healed by that.
Exactly.
And Jacob did not go and talk to Esau and tell Esau that, Esau, you have to change. You have to do this, that, and the other thing. This was all within Jacob. It's Jacob who changed his thoughts that brought about this incredible healing. And it made it pretty plain that Esau was pretty darn mad. And when he gathered all those men and was going to come to meet Jacob, Jacob actually had a reason to be afraid. Esau was not a happy camper at that point. So all of this transpired in Jacob's thought, and this horrible situation that had gone on for so many years ended. And he saw, as Linda said, and as the Bible says, he saw the face of God in his brother and Esau.
He realized he never existed. He was never real.
Was never real. So is this where your wrestling is bringing you? Has it brought you thus far? When you have a problem, are you wrestling with that angel to get this tremendous blessing that really, truly eliminates fear and hate and envy, competition, all gone. Tremendous story.
This is the power of a righteous prayer. This was a truly righteous prayer. This is the power that each one of us has when we pray correctly. This is the power of our watching.
So, if you haven't reached this point, and I'm not sure who has, but please don't complain about the problems that come up. They're just opportunities for you to learn more and to rise higher, to get this wonderful viewpoint. As Martha Wilcox writes in one of her chapters about, the prophet's viewpoint. Their viewpoint was what enabled them to get food when there was no food, the loaves and the fishes and other things, the manna, able to do tremendous healing work. It was this divine viewpoint, the change of base from the human to the divine. And we're all capable because God has made man capable of this, made you capable of this. And nothing can vitiate the power bestowed by God upon you. It's a paraphrase from Mary Baker Eddy.
Goes along with our calendar statement for today of, if you ever feel burdened, count your blessings and double your dose of love for God and man.
Yeah. Perfect.
Then, as Jacob did, you will rise in the majesty of your Maker, the one mind, and destroy the error of material belief. Period. Amen.
But there are minds many, it goes on. This is, she's quoting from 3rd edition. And, that's one of the hardest things, admittedly, to understand, that there are minds. It's easy to think there are minds many instead of the one mind. Seem to see it all around. Demonstrating the one mind, that would certainly bring in the millennium. It's all here for us. Quite wonderful. Any additions or corrections?
Well, thank you, Amanda, and thank you, everybody who participated. This was
Thank you.
really good.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great. Thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you all.
Thank you.